When you allow someone to talk and have a safe space to actually say what's on their mind, you can achieve a lot and cover a lot of ground. I'd say it's as simple as just listen. Keep the promises that you make to yourself. Whatever happens in life, whatever happens with your job, things can happen outside of your control. But if you say to yourself, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to stick to the promises, yes, it boosts your self-esteem, but it also commands respect from other people because you are the person that does what they say they're going to do. And if you can showcase that you are reliable through content on LinkedIn, I think it's the best combination to really advocate for yourself. You can make a name for yourself before someone's met you, so that when you walk into a room, they go, oh, you're Becca, I've seen your post on LinkedIn. Then you've already created a community before you're in the room, and why wouldn't we want to capitalise on that?
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Becca Horley. Becca is a specialist medical negligence solicitor at a national law firm. She has experience in complex serious injury matters, including brain, birth, psychiatric, and fatal injuries. Becca utilizes her LinkedIn platform to educate others on advocating for yourself, wellness, and improving patient safety. She is passionate about professional empowerment and personal development. Becca was awarded Solicitor of the Year 2025 at the Birmingham Law Society Awards. So, a very big warm welcome to the show, Becca.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Legally Speaking podcast. Finally, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law if you've seen it on the scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, probably 1 or 0.
A very convincing 1 or 0. And with that, we'll ask no more questions and move swiftly on to talk all about you. So to begin with, Becca, would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Sure. I studied law with criminology at university, at the University of Birmingham. And then I did a master's in professional legal practice alongside the LPC at the University of Law in Birmingham. And that's when I started to have a little think about what sort of areas of law I'd be interested in, and mainly what would want to make me wake up in the morning and feel excited about my job. And that's when I started learning more about medical negligence and how you can use law to help change people's lives and improve them. And I was looking at different firms, and the national law firm that I did my training contract at was, it had opportunities to do corporate and commercial and real estate, but also medical negligence as well. And so I did a training contract for 2 years, and then I qualified as a medical negligence associate in September 2021. And I've been on quite an exciting journey as a young professional since then, up to winning Solicitor of the Year this year in February, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and look, we've been following your journey very avidly here on the Legally Speaking podcast. We're always looking for the brightest and sharpest minds, but also those putting things back into the community, which you're doing a great, tremendous job of. Just want to kind of go a little bit deeper because you touched on it there in terms of medical negligence and your journey into it. Was there a defining moment that really inspired you to say, yes, this is absolutely the area that I want to go in versus so many others that are out there, particularly can be hard for people thinking about a career in the law?
Sure. So when I was at the University of Law studying, some of my now colleagues actually did a presentation about one of the big cases they're working on. And, when you're a student, it's exciting to know that the cases that your future colleagues are, it's in the news. It's very high profile work, which is always exciting. But it was also as well the story that they told us about how each individual client, they felt hope when they hadn't felt like that for a long time. They felt like there was someone fighting their corner for them. And I thought, what do I want from my career? And I thought, that's the role that I want to have. I want to be that support system for someone using all the skills and the knowledge that I've spent a lot of time at university studying. How can I transform that into a job that actually makes a difference? It started when I was at university, but when I think back to the A-levels that I studied, I did law, psychology, and biology. So I think my actual interests as well, the way my brain works, is always fascinated by science and law. And I get to combine both of those things. And it's a day that's never the same. You always get to learn new things. You're learning about medicine and your clients' lives and how to improve them. And I couldn't want more from a job, really.
Yeah, you really get to see the impact of your work for the clients that you're representing. And, you've had a whole range of cases that you've had across your desk, but you very much are specialised in medical negligence. Again, for our listeners, what
Yes.
particular areas within medical negligence do you advise on, and who do you act for? Just to give us a bit more of a flavour of your day to day.
Sure. So I only represent claimants, so individuals, patients, and their families. So I do a range of different cases where if someone's had a life-changing injury through no fault of their own, they would come to me. And I have a whole range of orthopedic, so complex orthopedic claims where someone may have lost function in their shoulder and arms due to maybe like a shoulder replacement not going to plan. I have a range of ophthalmology cases where there's been a delay in surgery. And so my clients have lost their sight. And then I also have a delay in diagnosis of cancer cases, stillbirth cases, and psychiatric claims as well. And so when there's been a fatal case, the client is then the person for the estate. So that would be their family. So a lot goes into the job in terms of, yes, you have to be a sharp legal mind, but you also have to be sensitive and empathetic, because a lot of, my clients, this is the worst thing they've ever gone through, or they're going through a bereavement. So it's definitely a balance of lots of different skills.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about on the Legally Speaking podcast, obviously about tech for good, and there's still the need for human touch. And obviously within your area of law specifically, how do you ensure that you obviously do maintain that human touch and don't perhaps cross the line between personal and professional, particularly given you're carrying very sensitive cases and matters? Is there any advice you would give to people who might be in similar industries that are dealing with very, very devastating situations at times?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of giving a personal touch to clients, I think it's having conversations over the phone, going to see them in person. So something that I offer is I always say I'll come and visit you at your home, because often clients that have had really serious injuries, coming into a big swanky office isn't really on their top to-do list or even possible or accessible for them. So I always go and visit my clients at home, and we have a chat at the kitchen table on the sofa, and that makes it feel more friendly. And it's an interesting conversation. I think personal life versus professional life, because who I am and how I hold myself is how I hold myself in all areas of my life. So I think I respect the conversation that some things are strictly professional, but I think actually I think the way the legal profession needs to move forward is to bring our personal selves into our professional life, because it's one life, and that's how I bring a personal touch, is because I actually bring myself and my emotions. And there are times where cases do upset me and I really feel for my clients, but if I didn't have that empathetic and if I didn't actually care or feel those emotions, I don't think I'd have that driver to really be the advocate for them. So I actually think it's a winning combination.
Yeah, and you couldn't have said that any better. And I was just nodding here so happily in terms of, we had David Savage on, who was a former partner in sanctions expert, and he said there is no David in work and David at home. There's David. And I think similar to what you're saying there, Becca, in terms of you bring your
Yeah.
full self to work, and we're trying to encourage lawyers to be their true, authentic selves in and out of the workplace. And like you say, enhance that human to human connection, because I think it builds more trust, and you are able to get more done for your clients. And you're doing a tremendous job. And I know your cases are complicated, so this might be quite hard, but just want to get a sense of the client process, if we could you talk us through actually assisting a client through their case or claim from the beginning to the end result? You gave a very nice touching point there that you perhaps go and visit them at home but could you talk us from a sort of legal perspective what the start to finish of a journey might look like with some of your cases?
Sure. I think the best way to describe a medical negligence case is like building a puzzle. So you have to basically find lots of different pieces, and those are the evidence, and you put it all together to build a full picture that you would then present to a judge to argue your case. So the first puzzle piece is having a conversation with the client, asking them what's happened, what's their version of events, what's their story. And then we would write a witness statement based on their the initial conversation. And then what we do is we get their medical records in, we obtain expert evidence from sort of leading medical professionals across the country who have specific expertise in the specific areas of medicine that we need them to comment on, and we basically build a case. It's like, it's like solving a mystery. You put all of these things together, and I always explain it to my clients, so you put each puzzle piece as we go along, and we manage their expectations as to whether there's going to be prospects of being successful along the way, because one of the things that's a big part of this job is also having difficult conversations about, the law is strict and there's strict legal tests, and I have a duty to share that with my clients. And often, there may be really poor outcomes that don't actually fit within the legal test. So we have to have that conversation too. But often, we're building a case, we're building a picture, and we're storytellers, we're investigators, we're storytellers. It's our job to tell our client's story for them. And so a lot of the process of investigating a case is really getting to know the client, understanding how they tick, asking questions, but also leaving time to listen. You might, and in saying to them as well, like, you might be going on a walk, or you might be sat in the lounge later today and you've forgotten to say something to me. Give me a phone call, send it an email. And I often encourage my clients as well to keep a diary, because I find that really helpful, because often moments that their main concerns, because it can be quite stressful having a lawyer talking to you as well. And so I say to them, when you're just reflecting, make a note. And so in terms of the process, I'm then putting together all of this evidence, to present the best case that I can for them, and advocate for their needs.
And you give such a sort of overview of the depth of work that goes into it. I was just having images of some of the puzzles I'll do with my 3.5-year-old daughter that are easy, and some that are very complex, actually. And that's probably the same with some of your cases. You're putting these pieces together, and, it's all about trying to have a system and strategy to get the right end result for your clients. And I love that you talked about listening, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that ratio. Absolutely. And I think it's fantastic the work that you are doing. And I know how strongly you do advocate for your clients. And this might be a tricky question, so feel free to sort of, swerve it if you'd like. But is there a particular case or a most memorable case that you've worked on to date that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was recently on BBC News talking about one of my clients for a case that I'm working on. So I represent a number of patients who have suffered severe visual impairments or blindness as a result in delays in treatment. And I recently secured a strong settlement, an interim payment for one of my clients to receive a carer. So it means that he can now have support at home. And it's the day-to-day things. The way he describes it in the news feature, he says that, he can't see the butterflies, he can't see the birds, he can't pick up on things like facial expressions and interaction, and he needs someone to be his eyes for him. That's how he explains it. And it was really rewarding to secure admissions of liability in that case, and then also an interim payment. We've still got a long way to go, because these cases are so complex, but it's exciting because I'm learning all about different types of technology that can be helpful for him, in the home. And so we're working on, at the moment, valuing that together. But the interim payment that he's received will go, for now, it's going to give him care and assistance, because he's someone that lives by himself, and so he's navigating this new world in his 80s where he's now blind, which when he wasn't before, and it gives people a bit of their independence back. I think that's what I really do care about. I care, we're all humans, and I think there's often in society people get spoken down to or misunderstood when they've had an injury, but they're still humans, and I think that we have to really be. I think we have to just really put the effort in to make sure that changes, and support people wherever we can.
Yeah, there's a difference between care and genuinely caring. And I sense from the work that you're doing, you genuinely care, you go above and beyond. And like you said, that's a really tough experience for that individual you just mentioned there. And that's where that human touch and that empathy really does come in. You mentioned missions of liability. Again, for people who might be less familiar with your area, what does that mean specifically? Or for people who might be having a similar scenario in terms of maybe that could be an outcome for them? Just want to touch on that.
Yeah, of course. So when we're investigating a medical negligence case, there's 2 main steps that we have to prove. So the first part is liability. So we have to prove the legal tests, and it's called breach of duty and causation. And we can't move forward to valuing a case or seeking a settlement sum until we've proved liability. So what that means is that, number one, has the care that the person's received fallen below an acceptable standard? And if we can prove that number one, we also have to prove number two that breach of duty has caused an injury or a loss. And it's a two-part test, and you have to have both. And often it can be, one part requires a bit more evidence or a bit more explaining than the other. But you have to have both to be able to move forward to looking at how you potentially quantify a claim.
Yeah, no, thank you for giving such a detailed overview of that. Very, very helpful for our listeners. So you have dealt on a number of high profile cases, as we've sort of referenced. You've mentioned obviously some life-changing disabilities as a result of that. You've also acted with folks that have had, lots of issues over the years. So for you, what are some of the lessons you've learned from dealing with these patients and victims over the years that might be helpful for our audience to take away?
On a personal level, it's given me a whole perspective on life that nothing's guaranteed. And I'm very grateful that I can brush my teeth in the morning without assistance. I can walk down the road, I can walk to a shop. There's lots of different things that I had never really even, if I'm being completely frank, I had sort of gone through life sort of, going on a walk and brushing my teeth and being like, that's very normal. But for a lot of patients that, have these life-changing injuries, those simple tasks, they're not simple tasks anymore, and their quality of life is affected. So personally, it's really given me perspective. And there was a really sort of pivotal moment in my life a couple of years ago where I just decided I needed to turn it around for myself. And that's when I know that you're into running as well. I started running because I was like, I'm so lucky that I'm lucky I can walk, but I'm also lucky that I can put one foot in front of the other and run. And so I went from running 1 minute, getting out of breath, really struggling, to now I'm set to do the London Marathon next year, which is super exciting. But my work and my life has given me this perspective of how lucky I am. And so I'm taking every opportunity that I can to to basically grab life and just take it as, with what I've got now.
I love that. And I remember there's a charity called, I think it's the Hampson Association. I'm a Leicester Tigers rugby fan. I'm from Leicester originally. And one of the future prop forwards unfortunately got injured and broke their neck in a scrum.
Matt Hampson Foundation. Yeah.
Yeah. And, he's got the great tagline of get busy living. Right. And I think that's just so true. And, having that attitude of gratitude, like you've just referenced there, is fantastic. And you do give others a voice. So what does it mean to give a voice to someone who has been harmed by a medical professional or an institution?
I think it's using, I mean, as all humans, feeling heard and having a connection, that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us feel safe. And so I think for a lot of my clients, there's definitely issues of trust with medical professionals, but not in all cases, but in some cases, because I represent a number of clients who've been treated by a term called rogue surgeons. So that often means that it's an individual who is specifically either intended to cause harm, or where there is sort of incompetencies in the training that they've had, which has led to substantial errors in the care that they've received. And you go to a medical professional for help. And so when we have situations where clients have really poor outcomes that could have been avoided after sort of seeking out help, that can make them feel very anxious, and it's part of my job when they first come to us to make them feel safe and comfortable, and that's actually the top priority. And so, it's about developing that trust so that you can advocate for them. And in terms of advocating, it's telling their story. I use the skills, the network, the platform that I have to advocate for them, because often when you're going through something really traumatic and you're going through a process of grief of the life that you don't have anymore, you don't often have, to do that and advocate for yourself. That's where my role comes in, and I say you looking after yourself, and you get your rehabilitation, and you focus on your health. I'll do the bit where I talk for you, and that's what that really is. It's being a team with your client to get the possible outcome for their life.
Absolutely. It is about a team effort. And I love that you talk to trust as well. It's so important, and you were kind of
Mm.
alluding to it there in terms of building the trust with your clients. But how do you do that with some of the clients that might be very disillusioned or very vulnerable about what they've experienced, or oh, this is just going to be a lot of fees? Are the lawyers actually got the best interests at heart, looking after me?
Mm.
Anything you would say from that perspective on the relationship building with these clients that are in sometimes very horrible situations?
I think just let them talk. I think often when you've got someone maybe who's had really long waiting lists, or they've been waiting for an update for a long time from a healthcare institution, it's a very common feeling amongst my clients that they just want someone to listen to them, and they want, they'll start talking and they'll say to me, "Oh, I've never told anyone that before," or "I didn't realize I was thinking that." Um, and for me, I find the easiest thing for me is just to shush and listen to them, and that often. When you allow someone to talk and have a safe space to, actually say what's on their mind, you can achieve a lot and cover a lot of ground. I'd say it's as simple as just listen.
Are you a solicitor still stuck in the office while everyone else is on a sun lounger? Clio, yes, the legal software loved by over 150,000 legal professionals, wants to help you switch off this summer. With Clio, you can manage cases, clients, billing, and even client onboarding all in one place from any device. That means less faffing around with paper files and more time for ice creams, staycations, and just putting your feet up. And here's the best part. Sign up by the 31st of August 2025 and you'll get 25% off your first year of Clio. Visit clio.com/UK to book a demo and claim your offer. Terms and conditions apply. Now back to the show. I remember a mentor said to me very early, Rob, shut up. And it's so true, right? If you just shut up and listen,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when you're in boardrooms or you're in meetings or you're trying to do deals, because typically it could be a turn of phrase, it could be a tone of voice, it
Mm.
could be a word, it could be something that unlocks that thing that you might be able to get that could potentially best represent your people. And I always think the power of, keeping it very simple for our listeners who are watching this, think of the power of open questions in a funnel. You've got open questions here, direct questions here, and closed. If you want to get the best out of someone, just ask them a big fat open question. Describe to me,
Agreed.
explain to me, tell me, and then just shut up and listen. And that's the best way, like you say, to really get the
Yeah,
best out of your clients. You touched on home visits before, and I
sure.
love that you are bringing such a personal touch. And we're going to talk about your personal brand and social media in a moment. But in terms of the importance of this,
Mhm.
how important is a personal connection as being part of your work with your clients? And do you think that the home visits is really important to that?
I think it's absolutely essential. You learn the most about clients, first of all, because they're in an environment that's safe to them, but also when you're looking at valuing a claim and looking at all the different things that you could potentially help them with. You might not know that if they're in a wheelchair, but they live in a two-story home, if you hadn't gone to see them and they hadn't told you, you wouldn't know that actually a bungalow would be much more suitable. And so there's lots of different things that, the hallways might be too narrow for a wheelchair, but you don't know that unless you've been there. But there's, you learn so much about a person, how they live. And also we tailor, the advice that I give and the way I quantify claims is specifically tailored to each client. So going to see them in their home, how do they interact with their family? Do they have anyone to provide support and care for them? Are they just getting by because they're very stoic in personality and they're saying they're fine? Are they actually fine? Do they get out of bed in the day? Do they sit on the sofa? Are they able to get outside? How do they make a cup of tea? Is their microwave in the top line of cupboards and not on the surface? Can they reach the microwave? Like, there's lots of different things that you just wouldn't even know or be able to understand. What's the driveway like? Is there access through doorways? I could go on for ages. But if you don't go there and you don't see it for yourself, you can't paint a picture. And as I say, it's all about putting that puzzle together. And a big part of the puzzle in the middle is the client and their home environment, because that's where they spend their time. So it's really important to know that and understand it. And yeah, it really does build a complete picture. So I actually say to my clients, I'd really like to come and see you. Would that be okay? And I sort of start from that perspective instead of we could offer a home visit. I say, I'd love to come and see you in your home. Would you be comfortable with that? And that's what I often start with.
I love that. And it just shows that you are proactive, you care. And you took the words right out of my mouth. I was just thinking pieces of puzzles as you're articulating all those examples there. And, in cases, details matter. And, you going out there and seeing it first time, getting those details and understanding, it could be 2 centimeters thin, too narrow, a hallway or something like that. But you're not going to know that until you've been there and done that. And that can affect someone's livelihood completely. So I really appreciate you giving that level of answer. Okay, I want to talk about accountability now in the medical profession. Do you believe there is sufficient accountability in the medical profession when serious errors or misconduct does occur? And what changes would you like to see if so?
I think I'd like to see more accountability. I think my experience as a claimant lawyer is that we often experience significant delays in getting answers. And you have hospital trusts that carry out their own independent investigations, which is really helpful. And then they'll notify the patient that the harm has been suffered. But then when a legal case starts, there's almost a gap, and so I've had experience of 2-3 years before these admissions of liability, so acknowledgement of the legal tests is proven 3 years down the line, but you've got a patient 3 years ago who was told that harm was suffered. And so it's there's a really long gap, and that also as well, until you have liability admitted, you can't, get any sort of compensation or interim compensation. And so there's a period where you've got a patient that suffered harm, they've got a life-changing injury, but there's a gap. And so that's something that I would love to see, sort of progression and change in this area of law, where we can start getting rehab and money for assistance and support and care earlier on. And I understand, if there's a case where liability is disagreed between parties, naturally the NHS aren't going to throw money, you know, at a case, but where often, the cases that I run, we take on cases that we strongly believe are going to succeed. And so I think there needs to be a level of, why are we waiting? And
Yeah.
that's something I find really difficult. A part of my job that's quite difficult is explaining to the clients and keeping them happy while they're waiting, because they're in pain. They can't, they've got restricted function. It impacts all their relationships in their life. They might not be able to work anymore. It covers everything, and we have to say to them, "Oh, we're just chasing. We'll just come back to you." And that's quite a hard conversation. Sort of keeping the trust with the clients when it's out of our control, the delays and the responses. So I would like to see that changed.
Yeah, no, well said. And we are very pro access to justice and helping make good changes to the laws to help people, as you say. And I think you gave some cracking examples there. And you also touched on the NHS, and that leads nicely onto what I was going to ask around sort of representation and how that might differ depending on whether you're representing a client who's making a claim against an NHS trust or maybe a private hospital or a GP. Is there
Sure.
anything you would say to that?
So, I mean, I have experience representing claimants who have had treatment at NHS hospitals, GPs, and also private institutions. So, a lot of the time, if you've had surgery at a private hospital or by a private doctor, they will have insurance. And so the defendant in the claim is usually the insurer, because that's where the compensation, if you're successful, would come from. And so, in terms of a claim, there is more. I think there's more certainty if it's an NHS trust case, because there's a whole trust instead of an independent insurer, because you have to make sure that if you're having private treatment, you want to make sure that the private professional has insurance, because if anything were to go wrong, obviously we hope it doesn't, but if it was, then any compensation, if they don't have insurance, you couldn't, even if you were successful, you wouldn't be able to, it'd be harder to get anything out of that. But as I say, often, the private places have insurance, and so that's not really an issue.
Yeah, no, okay. Well, that's helpful to get some extra context and clarity around that. One thing I know you're also pro is assistive technology, and we're all about tech on the show as well. And you're passionate about exploring these options to help clients adjust to life-changing injuries that you've obviously listed and mentioned previously. So,
Yes.
can you tell us about some of the tech helping clients to adapt their life after injury?
Yeah, of course. So, one of the areas that I work on is clients that have had amputations. So it might be amputation as a result of a delay in diagnosis of treatment. So I have a client, so we're looking at different sort of prosthetics for legs, and it's a really, really exciting advancement in technology because, as I say, it's that hope piece. It gives people hope, and we're looking now at different legs which have a running leg, a high heel leg, a leg for day to day. What do you do when you don't want to wear the leg? But also as well, it's learning about how to make these things comfortable because it's all about the function. So it's all about giving people back. You're never going to replace the leg. You're never going to be able to give someone the exact same experience they had before. But because technology is advancing so quickly and it's so exciting to see what's out there, I just want to keep soaking up more and more information so that I've got the knowledge that I can say to my clients. And it gives them hope at the start. So, if we're successful and we settle your claim, we can claim for a running leg for you, for a high heel for you. You can go out with your friends and it will look like you have a leg. And that's the real things that people care about. It's going back to living their life as close to as possible as to how it was before. And yeah, I think if I was to lose my leg, I would definitely be looking for a pink high heel prosthetic. I'd be after that.
Well, look, and we always talk about tech for good, and that's a great way to boost confidence, make people feel included, get them back to the things that they enjoyed doing before. And like you say, it may not necessarily be a direct replacement, but it certainly enables them to get back and get busy living, as I said before. Okay, I want to talk about awards because we touched on that in the intro and we mentioned before, but you have had a brilliant year because you were awarded Solicitor of the Year 2025 at the Birmingham Law Society Awards and finalist for the upcoming 2025 Greater Birmingham Young Professional of the Year Awards. These are huge achievements. So what do they mean to you?
They mean a lot to me, actually. I feel very, very proud. I've been on a really big sort of personal growth journey, and I've decided, I want to use that for good. I want to share with other people what I've learned because if I can, it's been a long few years for me, and if I can shortcut that at all for other people, and give some advice that means that they get to where I now am in terms of happiness quicker, then that's what I'd want. But yeah, no, I think winning Solicitor of the Year is a huge deal. It was a very competitive category, but I also won it at 3 years qualified, which was a big surprise. But yeah, I've had the judges have had some really lovely comments, and they've really helped me. They've said to me, it was clear, from the confidence and the passion you had, and I'm so glad that came across because I really care about my job. I really care about making a change to this profession. I want lawyers to look after themselves and be the best version of themselves because that's how we do the best at our job. And for that to be picked up by the judges and to win that award is, yeah, a real big career highlight.
And I'm feeling that. I always say everything is energy, and the passion just oozes out of you in terms of the for the work that you do and for helping and uplifting others. So absolutely well deserved and an incredible feat. Okay, one of the platforms I want to talk about now, which has changed my life and I'm forever grateful for, and I think people are still not using it to its best advantage, is LinkedIn. And you very much are using LinkedIn and a top legal LinkedIn influencer earlier in the year.
It's a mouthful,
How
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a hell of a mouthful. But how do you utilize LinkedIn yourself to share content on particularly prioritizing wellness and advocating for yourself?
So I would say LinkedIn for me is like a professional diary. It's like my online CV. It's how I showcase myself and my expertise to clients, to employers, to colleagues. It's how I make an impact in my career. And from a personal no, I find it's given me a voice to share all the things that I'm passionate about, but also as well, it means I'm bringing in business like a partner at 3, 4 years qualified. And why wouldn't we want to capture on the potential of the reach from LinkedIn by sharing things that we care about? And a lot of the things that I'm passionate about, I do a lot of mentoring with students across Birmingham universities, and I say to them, look, you can add employers on LinkedIn, you can comment on things they post about, you can engage with it, and that's an opportunity that 5, 10 years ago, well, it might have been starting out, but it wasn't such a. You can make a name for yourself before someone's met you, so that when you walk into a room, they go, "Oh, you're Becca. I've seen your post on LinkedIn," and then you've already created a community before you're in the room. And why wouldn't we want to capitalize on that?
Yeah, you're talking my language, and I give lots of LinkedIn training and talk to people exactly to that reason, because this
Hmm.
is a 24/7 professional networking party that's happening digitally every minute of every hour. Your CV is going around the world. It's your advert to the world. And if you start chipping into
Hmm.
that networking party by sharing content, putting things out there, engaging, meeting people, collaborating, all of that good stuff, then great things are going to happen. And they've obviously happened for you. And I want to touch on a recent LinkedIn post you did, because you do advocate for professional empowerment and personal development, sharing a lot of your knowledge on LinkedIn. In your recent LinkedIn post, you shared, I believe, what does empowering mean? Something that is
Mm.
empowering makes you more confident, makes you feel that you are more in control of your life. So, what would be a tip you would give to those to make themselves feel more empowered about the work they
Mhm.
are doing?
So, something that I hold as a real sort of life motto is keep the promises that you make to yourself. So, whatever happens in life, whatever happens with your job, things can happen outside of your control. But if you say to yourself, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to stick to the promises, yes, it boosts your self esteem, but it also commands respect from other people, I think, because you are the person that does what they say they're going to do. And I think there's no better compliment than someone to say, oh, you're reliable. Oh, you did what you said you were going to do. And whether that's, future employers, clients, you're a reliable person. And if you can showcase that you are reliable through content on LinkedIn, I think it's the best combination to really advocating for yourself.
I love that. And you found your passion. I said in a post recently, if you find a passion, you'll find a way to be consistent. And through consistency, you'll build trust, and people will get to know you, and they'll get to like you, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
want to work with you. They'll want to support you. They'll want to lift you up. And you absolutely are exactly where you need to be and want to be. And it's lovely to see. So just before we close, a couple of final questions in terms of looking forwards. How do you see the future of medical negligence and serious injury developing in the coming years in light of the tech revolution that we're going through, and changes in and around the world?
I think it's really exciting. I think we can offer a lot more hope to our clients. I think the more technology is available, the more we can, claim for things that are going to really make a tangible difference to our clients' lives. And so I think that that's really exciting in terms of the what you can claim for. But in terms of the way I work, I think that AI is going to revolutionise how we assess cases, how we assess risk of success. I think it's going to revolutionise the way we review, for example, medical records. So I go through page by page looking at people's medical records, and there's going to be technology that helps us do that in a way that's more efficient. And so we can, and also that's a point for the client excellence point, is that if we can progress the cases faster, there's going to be, from our side, we can move forward faster. And hopefully on the defendant side, that means that they can move faster forward as well. And then there's that gap in waiting for compensation and for aids and assistance can get shorter, and that's the goal. But also as well with patient safety, we can have a look, we can assess all the cases. For example, NHSR could have a look at all the cases that year that have been brought to them. They could use AI to be like, look, these are the main areas where patient safety needs to be improved, then get suggestions for training and support in those places, and then patient safety improves. The main goal, whatever side that you work on in this area of law, is to improve patient safety. It's one shared goal, and I really do believe that technology can help us achieve that.
Absolutely. And it sounds very, very exciting. And you have a growth mindset and an adoption mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important as well. Okay, finally, what advice would you give to aspiring solicitors who want to follow a similar path to yours, qualifying into medical negligence?
The main thing I would say to them is make a plan and stick to it. And it's the same point as to keeping the promises you make to yourself. Make a plan, start engaging with people that you find interesting, that you find aspirational. The people so the first ever talk that I went to about medical negligence, they are now my colleagues. I put myself in the room with them because I wanted to. And I think it's as clear as I'm really into manifesting, visualization, um, because it works. If you believe in yourself and you believe in your plan and you just take one step forward every single day towards that, there's actually no way that you can't achieve it. And I think that we need to have that attitude. So I say to the students that I mentor, make a plan, stick to it. And if you can see yourself achieving it, then you absolutely will.
I love that. And I remember when I set up my legal recruiting business way back when, I wrote on a piece of paper, BTA, believe to achieve, no matter what, like whatever it takes, like I'll make it happen. I've always had that mindset. And like you say, you just keep taking one step at a time to deliver on it. It doesn't need to be progress at lightning speed. As long as you're going in that direction and taking those steps, you'll get there. This has been an absolute masterclass, Becca. Really enjoyed learning more about your career and the work that you're doing, and being a modern legal professional. As I mentioned off air, I think you're absolutely that and doing fantastic things. So if our listeners want to follow you or learn more about your career, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to share any websites or any social media handles. We'll also share them with this very special episode for you too.
Oh, thank you. So on LinkedIn, it's Becca Horley. And then I have an Instagram page called Life of Becca. And that's more of a that's more of a diary for me. And I actually set up that Instagram page a few years ago when I wanted to basically make the most out of my life and have memories to look back on. And so it includes personal parts of my life too, but it also has a lot of career highlights and mindset content as well. So so Life of Becca on Instagram and Becca Horley on LinkedIn.
There we have it. And there are lots of highlights, and there'll be many more highlights and awards coming your way. We have absolutely no doubt. So thank you ever so much, Becca, for joining me on the Legally Speaking podcast sponsored by Clio. It's been an absolute blast. But from all of us for now, wishing you lots of continued success with your career and future pursuits. Over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.